What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you so much for joining me today on this beautiful day. I hope you all are doing well today. And to all my new supporters joining us, welcome to the family. Welcome to the family. Everybody, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and turn all post notifications on. We jumping right into this video today. Today, I will be reacting to and learning about the history of England. Now, this video was highly recommended, and that is exactly why I'm starting it now.
Names are hard, especially when it comes to the British Isles. The island of Britain is home to England, Scotland, and Wales, while the island of Ireland is composed of their...
It actually took me some time to learn that, to actually fully understand that right there, yeah.
Republic of Ireland and the United Kingdom's Northern Ireland. This is not only a nightmare to keep track of, but as we've seen, this is all subject to change, probably a little sooner than we think.
What do you mean
I say
by
all
that?
this to clarify what we're actually going to be talking about in this video. England. Now,
What do you mean by subject to change? This video is a little outdated too. This is 5 years ago. We 5 years late, man.
not only is England not Britain, but its history is plenty interesting all its own.
Oh.
So, to see how England grew from a simple Roman province to the master of Britain and a major world power, let's do some history. Our earliest documentation for England comes with the arrival of Julius Cheekbone Caesar, who crossed over from Gaul in 55 BC.
Julius Cheekbone Caesar. Okay.
The native Celts were none too pleased with their new neighbors, so Rome kind of stalled for a century until Emperor Claudius established the province of Britannia. Roman influence on the island was rather slim outside of the main port cities. Since it was hard enough to schlep all those armies across the channel, they were happy to delegate certain responsibilities to the local kings. In 60 AD, one such client king bequeathed half of his lands to Rome, but when the empire glommed all of it anyway, the late king's wife Boudica led a rebellion that burned through several eastern cities, including Londinium, before she was defeated in battle. Later, Romans expanded outwards to the edge of...
Did I hear Londinium? Londinium? 5 years ago? Wait, 5 years ago? Was it called that 5 years ago? Nah. This had to be from back. Before our time, yeah. Londinium. This was the original name of the city London.
Caledonia before Hadrian said nope and built a wall across the island to stop any hotshot general from getting ideas. The benefit of Britannia's insulation was that it didn't see much disruption from the carousel of imperial civil wars, but the downside was that Britannia was the first province to be cut loose when the barbarians started rolling up in the 400s. The next several centuries are marked by a constant shuffling between small Romano-Britannic kingdoms and a tidal wave of northern European newcomers. The polite term for this is disorganized, and the accurate term for this is gross. The early medieval period saw raids and migrations from Picts, Angles, Jutes, and Saxons, and while the map doesn't stop fidgeting with its borders anytime soon, the players get a little clearer by the late 600s. Here we can see 7 major Anglisk and Saxon kingdoms of Northumbria, Kent, East Anglia, Mercia, Essex, Sussex, and Wessex. Those last 3 being East, South, and West Saxony, in case you were wondering why England sexed up so many of its place names. These kingdoms weren't entirely Britannic nor fully Germanic. Just like the Romans, it was a case of gradual integration between lots of small and unique groups of people, sometimes friendly, sometimes stabby. For a dash of literary context, the legendary character of King Arthur is set specifically against the backdrop of these Germanic migrations. Historically speaking, our record gets a little clearer in the Christian monasteries of Northumbria, where the scholar Bede wrote the Ecclesiastical History of England, our best source for this period. And monasteries all across Northumbria were becoming magnificent palaces of literature and art throughout the 600s and 700s.
Yes, all over,
Northumbria
man.
can have a little bit of a golden age, as a treat. The good news is that this was really shiny, but the bad news is that maybe this was a little bit too shiny, as the glittering attracted our old pals the Vikings, who rolled up to the island monastery of Lindisfarne to save the priceless relics from the totally unrelated fires that started burning right as the Vikings arrived. Weird. From there, the Vikings kept on coming, raiding all up and down the coasts and even heading inland with the Great Heathen Army.
Of course, because, I mean, that's what Vikings do, baby. They see nothing but wealth in their eyes, and that's what they're going for. They're
Especially
invading
bad
everybody,
news for the
man.
King of Wessex, who was partway through conquering Mercia when the Scandinavians glommed their way down the eastern coast. They didn't have the means or the interest to form a single unified state, but the laws of these incoming Danes held sway over a pretty beefy stretch of land. So we call this thingy the Danelaw because when historians aren't creative, they're at least direct. Well, the Danelaw became a shiny mercantile midpoint between Ireland and Scandinavia.
Danelaw in Wessex? Guys, this is my first time hearing these names, man. So forgive me if I'm a little lost. I'm learning in this video. I am learning. And I'm not just going to be pausing the video just to say anything now, okay? just to try to sound all sophisticated. Look, I'm learning, man. I didn't know about this. I wasn't aware of this. I'm aware of the history of Great Britain, but not the history of England as a whole. No. This is something new.
Reverso-glommed by the Kingdom of Wessex. By 927, King Aethelstan had conquered all the way to Northumbria and began to style himself as King of England. So now, finally, we can actually discuss England as a single state.
Okay.
In the century following, Northumbria played hopscotch between English and Viking rule, and some wacky royal gymnastics resulted in the Scandinavian Canute becoming King of England, Denmark, and Norway for 2 decades. But despite the near-constant tire fire of Scandinavian invasions and an extremely squiggly royal lineage, England had become impressively well run for the time, as the governing bureaucracy was organized and they knew how taxes worked. Not bad. But, as will become a running theme in the next few centuries, there's no getting over that pesky question of royal succession. After the death of King Edward in 1066, the crown passed to Harold Godwinson, but 2 other parties wanted that shiny headwear for themselves, namely King Harald Hardrada of Norway and Duke William of Normandy. Hardrada arrived to challenge Godwinson for the title of one true herald, but was beaten at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. However, Godwinson's luck ran out 1 month later when... And that's the Norman conquest
got defeated?
in a nutshell.
Oh,
In
man.
contrast to the other assorted cases of England being conquered, this one had lasting significance. Firstly, William was set on keeping his hot new kingdom, so he invented this little doohickey called a castle and built them all over England to protect his armies from the odd revolt. Meanwhile, he replaced the English aristocracy with freshly imported Norman barons. Now, the Normans, being from France, were French, so they spoke their native language instead of the local Old English. Over the centuries, these 2 languages smushed into each other to create what we recognize as English, our beautiful disaster of a language. The last significant consequence was that William was still Duke of Normandy, and his supervisor, the King of France, was a little miffed that he went and yoinked himself a kingdom. And this diplomatic hiccup would embroil England and France in a casual 600-year-long rivalry. Now, this is normally the point where English history slavishly trails along the royal family tree through all its twists and turns, but this video is a summary, and I don't care about kings. Royal gymnastics are far too dull to be this needlessly confusing. I say this now so we can skip the faff later on. What matters to us here in the middle 1100s is that the royal family married across the channel, so now...
Wait. I kind of want to read that. England started using St. George's Cross in the 1190s, becoming the official flag centuries later, but life is easier if we take consistent iconography where we can get it. Ain't that the truth? And that word was a little tongue twister. Man.
What matters to us here in the middle 1100s is that the royal family married across the channel, so now the King of England became the Duke of Normandy, the Count of Anjou, and the Duke of Aquitaine. England has never been taller. This Angevin period rewrites Anglo-Frankish relations to the tune of "you got chocolate in my peanut butter." Anywho, with this absurdly large tax base and access to half of France load of natural resources up and down the Atlantic coast, the Angevin Empire was an economic powerhouse. Of course, money means rich people, and rich people means armed robberies, so this period is the main historical setting for the legends of Robin Hood, most closely associated with the reign of the crusading King Richard the Lionheart at the turn of the 13th century. Speaking of military stuff, England took this opportunity to hop westward and glomp onto the Dublin-y part of Ireland. They tried for more, but they didn't really get much else. Conquest is all well and good, but it's also expensive, and France was itching to get the rest of its France back, so the early 1200s saw Normandy, Anjou, and most of Aquitaine go poof. Meanwhile, the barons were fed up with the monarchy, that makes 2 of us, so they forced a few kings to sign a contract recognizing that teamwork makes the dream work. As in, the Magna Carta makes kings consult their barons, and this puts us on track to get Parliament a ways down the line. Elsewhere in Britain, King Edward Longshanks conquered the Kingdom of Wales and glomped onto Scotland for a hot second, but they broke free. The problem for England was that Scotland had allied with France, and by the mid-1300s, France was in a century-long win streak. King Edward III was a big fan of the part where England owned half of France, so he went for broke and claimed a right to the French kingship to justify a continental invasion. A bold strategy. It won't work. But it took a century for that to become apparent. From 1337 to 1453, England and France were locked in a 100 years war.
Oh my
Edward
gosh,
oversaw the
that's
first
how long?
act, where the English poured across the Channel and thrashed the French army at the Battle of Crécy. To explain why, we've got to dig into the real juicy stuff. Economics. Alright, look, I minored in econ. I have to at least pretend like this was worth something, okay? It all comes down to how they collected taxes. England had the sophistication to tax money and put it towards a professional army, while France took payment in goods and conscription, so their army was bigger, sure, but far weaker. England's advance would have pressed onward after the surprise guest appearance of plague. Soon after the fighting resumed, the new French king, Charles V, had a much better time than his predecessor and pushed the English out to the edges of Gascony and Calais. The third phase of the war is the spicy stuff that shows up in all those Shakespeare plays. We're talking Battle of Agincourt, Henry V, Hella Longbows, take that, Frenchies! After the loss, France fell into a civil war and almost collapsed until Joan Kick-Ass d'Arc arrived to absolutely steamroll the English. King Henry VI had exactly 0 ways to handle this, so England got swept right on out of there. By 1453, all they had left was a tiny little sliver of Calais. Despite the war's overt goal of conquer France, it inadvertently cemented a distinct English identity through language, national heroes, and insular geography. The other major consequence was, big shock, another succession crisis. I've covered the War of the Roses before, and I respect you too much to bore you with this. All that matters is that a king died, and 2 families spent a century stabbing each other over who would get the crown.
Oh my goodness. Wait, but how does that even make sense? Isn't the crown supposed to get passed down to the king's son or whoever comes next down the line? Isn't it? Ain't that how things work? Or is that how things work now? But before, it was kind of like, it's a decision. It's a decision, you know, amongst everybody. Which isn't going to go well because, of course, everybody wants to be royalty. Everybody wants to be king. Everybody want to be at the top of the throne. Come on now. So we got to go to war for this.
Big ups to Henry VII for marrying the houses of York and Lancaster together to create the Tudor dynasty and resolve that mess for good. The Tudors managed to accomplish quite a bit in their century-long runtime. The first order of business for King Henry VIII was to formalize the rules for royal succession, presumably because he had to read about the War of the Roses and decided never again. But he also had outside problems, as King Charles of Spain and the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, coincidentally the same Charlie, was getting a smidge overpowered since he put the Pope under house arrest. Further complicating matters was the little fact that Henry's first wife was also Charles's aunt, and she wasn't bearing any male heirs. Henry deftly solved the 3 problems of Charles, the Pope, and his wife in one move by going,
I want to get rid of my wife, but only the Pope can annul the marriage. And Charles locked him in a box.
Diet Protestant and forming his own church. This new Church of England didn't really lean that hard into Protestant theology, but the real swerve was that the church answered only to the king. This quasi-reformist compromise wasn't exactly the easiest thing in the world to enforce.
Catholics believed that breaking with Rome was far too radical, while hardcore reformists thought Henry didn't go far enough. Okay.
But the Tudors made it work. Meanwhile, back in geopolitics land, Henry made a new push into Ireland and tried and failed to bully Scotland into England. In the second half of the century, Queen Elizabeth I held the fort against an increasingly aggressive Spain, way too hyped on conquistador cash to remember what hubris means. In 1588, Spain hucked an armada at England in the hopes of conquering it, but English cannons and English weather smashed the fleet to bits. When Elizabeth died without an heir, the crown passed to her nearest male relative, who happens to be King James VI of Scotland. So in 1603, James became King of Scotland and England. Everything after the Union of the Crowns is the Britain plotline, where they glomp all the Isles, make an empire, all that rule Britannia jazz. So this is where we'll wrap our history of England.
And that's what I'm familiar with. I wasn't familiar with the history of England. I am so glad I decided to watch this recommended video today. Boy, I felt clueless in this one. I felt like I didn't know jack. Look, you live and you learn. You live and you learn. It's okay. Ain't no shame in my game. It's the reason why we make these videos.
This give history a bad rap. At a glance, it's a 1600-year-long nightmare that's stuffed with more monarchs than anybody should be forced to remember. And it's easy to get bogged down in any one episode or to lose track entirely. But the good news is that just because English historians are sadistically meticulous and blindingly self-obsessed doesn't mean that we have to be. Because if we zoom out a little bit and focus on England as a unit rather than a backdrop for royal gymnastics, the important kings will make sense in context and we avoid getting bogged down in the details. So then we can clearly see the macro plot progression from Roman province through the Heptarchy into the conflicts with France and out towards the formation of Britain. So let English history show why the big picture is often the clearest and also serve as an object lesson in the historiographic benefits of restraint.
This was satisfying.
Thank you so much.
Original video link will be in my description down below. You guys already know how I do. We have to show love and support to these original content creators when we react to their videos. Everybody, please feel free to let me know down below in the comment section. Well, of course, especially if you live in England. Of course, well, I hope you know the history of England, but of course, most of you probably know the history of England, just like how I know the history of America. This was just great. This was great to learn. I'm actually going to read up on some articles. Can I actually find a summarized article? I don't think there's any articles that'll break this down into reading deck. Hold on. I don't know if that's possible. Like in a Wikipedia search, history of England? No way they have a Wikipedia search of the history of England. What? The territory today known as England became inhabited more than 800,000 years ago as the discovery of stone tools and footprints at Happisburgh in Norfolk have indicated. The earliest evidence for early modern humans in northwest Europe have jawbone discovered in Devon at Kent's Cavern in 1927. Kent's Cavern in 1927 was redated in 2011 between 41,000 and 44,000 years old. My goodness. Continuous human inhabitation in England dates to around 13,000 years ago. At the end of the last glacial period, the region has numerous remains from the Mesolithic and Neolithic and Bronze Age, such as Stonehenge and Avebury. In the Iron Age, all Britain south of the Firth and Forth. That's my first time ever hearing that word. Firth? The Firth? You learn something new every day. Firth and Forth was inhabited by the Celtic people known as the Britons, including some Belgic tribes, the Atrebates, the Catalvelloni, I hope I said that right, and Trinovantes. In the southeast in AD 43, the Roman conquest of Britain began. The Romans maintained control of the province of Britannia until the early 5th century. Somebody please let me know if I said these tribe names right. Starting right here. Of course, it's going to highlight the whole thing. Starting right here. Somebody please let me know if I said these names right. The end of Roman rule in Britain facilitated the Anglo-Saxon settlement of Britain, which historians often regard as the origin of England and of the English people. The Anglo-Saxons, a collection of various Germanic peoples, established several kingdoms that became the primary powers in present day England and parts of southern Scotland. They introduced the Old English language, which largely displaced the previous Brittonic language. The Anglo-Saxons warred with British successor states in western Britain and the Hen Ugled? Somebody let me know if I'm saying these right. Raids by Vikings became frequent after about AD 800, and the Northmen settled in large parts of what is now England. During this period, several rulers attempted to unite the various Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. I am so glad I read this article. I didn't even think we was gonna find a quick article to read up on, but here we are. This article just made everything so much less confusing. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining me today to react and learn about the history of England. This video was very fascinating and intriguing, and I'm definitely looking forward to more educational videos like this. So what I need you guys to do is feel free to spam my comment section and use that suggestion link down below in my description, man. Everybody, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and turn all post notifications on. Share this video and this channel to your friends and family members, whoever you feel may be interested in joining the family to watch some of these amazing educational videos on a daily basis. And everybody, please feel free to let me know what you thought about this video down below in the comments section. And feel free to educate me on any information that you feel I may have missed throughout this video, or any information that you feel was not included in this history summarized England video. Once again, I will catch you all in the next reaction video. Stay safe.